What's up, everyone? Today we're going to take a look at the Dutch colonization. It's called New Netherlands, and in particular, how that colonization by Holland, by the Dutch, eventually will lead to the birth of this famous American city, home to Biggie Smalls.
Home Biggie Smalls, Rockefeller headquarters, ladies and gentlemen.
And of course, there I am over the years, getting old and even more handsome as time moves on. Now, what you need to know is a couple of things, and just more background more than anything else, not super important, is Spain basically controlled the area of the Netherlands, and in 1579, with a little help from Protestant England, Holland, the Dutch, are free from Spanish control. And really, a big part of Holland or the Netherlands expansion is done by companies such as the Dutch East India Company. And this was a company which was designed to bring profits to its investors. It's a joint stock company, and really in the 1600s, so we're talking 17th century here, Dutch are really a commercial and naval powerhouse. They are at the peak. They're making some big money and doing pretty well for themselves. The Dutch East India Company is expanding all over the world, and they hire a British guy, a English explorer by the name of Henry Hudson, to go explore on behalf of the company. And we have a real-life recreation. Here it is. Take a look at the map. There he is, cruising along the coast, and he goes into the area of what will be Delaware and New York. It's not called that yet. And this English explorer was intended to find the Northwest Passage for the Dutch East India Company. They're looking for a shortcut to the Indies in 1609. So this is taking place, and this establishes Dutch claims to this region. Now, keep in mind, England and Spain and France are also peeking around these areas, and Jamestown was established in 1607. The colony of Quebec was established not too long after up in Canada, so we have this competition taking place. Now, what ends up happening is they establish their claim. Hudson River is named after Henry Hudson, and the first permanent Dutch settlement in what will become New Netherlands takes place at a place called Fort Orange.
Oranges are always orange, O-R-A-N-G-E.
And Fort Orange is built like around 1623, 1624, I think it's completed, and it is built in what is today Albany, New York, and you can see it right there on the map. Now, it's not the first kind of Dutch settlement. There's another fort that survives for around 4 years. I just call it Fort Nas to help me remember it. And it was established not by the Dutch East India Company, but by another company, the Dutch, wait for it, West India Company. The Dutch West India Company is the one who establishes these settlements. Now, Fort Nas lasts for 4 years. It's more of a military defense warehouse, keeping goods and things like that. Eventually it comes in disrepair, and they replace it with the big one, Fort Orange. Now, Fort Orange, why is it there? Why is the Dutch West India Company establishing these settlements? And it really is for profit. And in particular, the fur trade. Here's a recreation of that fort with the Dutch ships right off the coast. So they're there, and along the Hudson River, rivers are important for travel into the interior, and they want to make money. And in particular, the fur trade is going to be the money makers. Now, one of the most well-known things, if anything, that people know about the colonization of New Netherlands is what happens with Manhattan. And the story goes, the Dutch come in there and get one of the best real estate deals ever when they offer something like $24 worth of stuff to get 22,000 acres of land in what will become Manhattan. By buying it from a local native tribe. Now, this story, of course, is Largely myth, because there's a whole bunch of issues that complicate this. One is Native Americans did not have the notion of private property rights as the European settlers did. You know, there was no sense that you could sell this land, and some historians say that they merely sold them the right to use the land. There's also a question as to whether or not the Native Americans who sold it to the Dutch even were the tribe that had traditionally used that area. There was stories that they actually were from another island around the colony. So, who knows? Keep in mind the motives of the colony of New Netherlands is profit, and of course, that profit is going to largely come from not tobacco, not rice, not those things, but fur. She's a furry girl. And what you need to keep in mind is even the seal of the colony of New Netherlands very clearly tells you they're out largely for the beaver trade. So their profit motive, fur trade, profits, is a key aspect of the colony of New Netherlands. Now this is going to lead to some interesting dynamics developing between the colony of New Netherlands and the local native people. For one, unlike the British, who are going to come in huge numbers to the east coast of the, continent, the Dutch are going to come in smaller numbers. They're going to attempt to have favorable trading relations with the native people, because the native people are the ones who know where the beaver roam and how best to get the fur. So you're going to have a more cooperative relationship. Not a perfect one. The Dutch will have their fair share of wars, you'll see in just a moment. Now, another unique aspect of the Dutch colonization is the fact that the colony of New Netherlands, New Amsterdam, is the fact that it is a company town, meaning it is run entirely as a business. It's run by the Dutch West India Company with its headquarters over in Amsterdam. The purpose of the colony is to get profit for the stockholders, to generate revenue, and as a result of it being run as a company town, some unique things are going to take place in the colony of New Netherlands. And there's the settlement as it grows. And these things are, for one, there's a lack of democratic institutions in the colony. There is not going to be any representative assembly like the House of Burgess in Virginia or the town hall meetings like in Massachusetts Bay Colony. There's no kind of democracy in a sense. There's a lack of religious freedom in the colony. It is profit, profit, profit. So those ideals of religious freedom are absent. Those religious motives are absent from the colony. Another aspect of the colony of New Netherlands is it doesn't get a lot of settlers. There's not a lot of people that want to come to the colony. There's other colonies of the Netherlands that are more, ideal for settlement. And, if you're basing it on profit in the fur trade, a lot of people actually does the opposite. It runs down the likelihood of profits. So you have not a lot of settlers coming, very few people coming. And when those individuals who do come, you have something called patroonships. And this was like a feudal estate where people would come and have these huge land grants, and if you settle 50 people, you get more land. And so what you get is a very small number of people having lots of land and the majority of people not having much at all. There was something unique, though, about New Netherlands. And think about where it is established in what is today New York. And that is, it is enormously diverse. There's a very cosmopolitan society. And as a result, you get all these different people coming.
It's a small world after all. It's a small world after
all these different people coming. I mean, it's a port town. It's right there along the Hudson River. And in the colony of New Amsterdam, modern-day New York City, you have a mix of religious groups there. You have Jews there, Catholics, Protestants, Puritans. You have 18 different languages. So, that idea of diversity of America, really, New Netherlands, the colony of New Netherlands, represents that more than any of the other 13 British colonies. But that's also difficult to govern. In fact, more than half the population are not even Dutch. You got French, you got all sorts of different people in the colony itself. So now that you know the kind of why they came and what the colony was like, you got to know the problems they started to have. And I've already revealed some of them. Not a lot of people come to the colony, but the big problem starts taking place when New Netherlands has a series of wars called the Beaver Wars. And if you click that link right there, you're going to learn all about the Beaver Wars. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this lecture discussing them. But partly because of their strained relations with the native people. There were massacres that took place, the Dutch and the natives. Both sides were fighting each other because if you were not trading with the Dutch, they had no interest in your presence on the continent. And so you had this really strained relationship, and that led not only the threat or the fear of the native people, but it also was the fear of other nations such as England. And the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam builds a defense system, a wall on the northern portion of the colony. And it is designed to keep out the native and the English threat. And these threats were very serious. This is like a real-life Game of Thrones here. Competition is fierce. Now, this wall is built, and it'll become the famous Wall Street where the stock market is held and takes place. But there's a problem here. And yes, that wall was a pretty gnarly defense system, but all of this is completely vulnerable right into the harbor of the Hudson River. So that's not going to be very effective at keeping someone out. Hint, hint, the British. Now another problem develops, and that is there are other European countries trying to establish themselves in the North American continent. And one unexpected one is Sweden.
English girl, the Swedish meatball. It's very sauce to me.
1638, the Swedes establish a fort over in what will become Delaware. And this along the Delaware River, this settlement along the Delaware River is never really a big threat. It's a sad colony. Not a lot of people go. It's not, exactly threatening the Dutch, but the Dutch don't like their settlement in their region. And so in 1655, the Dutch send a military expedition under the authority of a guy that has the nickname Father Wooden Leg. And in 1655, the Swedish fort falls in a bloodless fight, and the colony of New Sweden is incorporated into the colony of New Netherlands. Now, the big threat, though, is going to come with the British. And the big threat with the British is going to come at this point. The King of England is a guy by the name of King Charles II, and you start getting the colony of the Dutch colonies bumping into the English colonies, particularly here in the Connecticut region. And the English do not want the Dutch in their area. They're competing with one another for resources and trade and Native American alliances and things of that nature. In fact, you have the Dutch kicked out of the Connecticut Valley area by the English colonists. And what you see happening is as the New England colony grows, then the New Netherland colony kind of remains stagnant. Remember, the New England colonies had this great migration of people coming into this region. That doesn't happen with New Netherlands. And what ends up happening is King Charles II sends over in 1664.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it.
New York, New York. A military expedition. He gives a huge piece of land. Remember, anytime the king gives a plot of land to a group or individuals, it's a proprietary colony. And this military expedition comes over. He gives the land to his bro, the Duke of York, James the Duke of York. No shots are fired. There's no epic battle or anything like that. The Dutch colony basically surrenders, and New Amsterdam is renamed New York in honor of James the Duke of York. And just like that, the map, which New Netherlands, New Amsterdam, right down there, suddenly now becomes New York. And more importantly, though, by 1664, England has a colony that is stretching from Maine all the way down to the Carolinas. And this gives them strategic advantages. The middle colonies, which New York will be a part of, will be strategically important with all their rivers into the interior. It gives them a powerful harbor. The Hudson River goes into the interior, and they are building up their empire slowly. And of course, this will eventually lead to conflict with France. Now, a couple things about the colony of New York. It doesn't really pop. It's a very autocratic colony. There is huge amount of power in a small number of landowners. There's not a lot of freedom or political democracy taking place. And as a result, not a lot of people go to New York. But it is a mixed, very diverse economy because those people that were there in the colony of New Netherlands merge into the colony of New York. And if you go to New York, there are still legacies of the Dutch in the city. In fact, the city of New York's seal, official seal, does have the Native Americans with the Dutch beaver and windmills and Dutch settlers. In fact, names like Harlem and Brooklyn, two very important New York areas, were derived from Dutch words. There I am in Amsterdam. That closes us out, and of course, it's the takeover.
'Cause we taking over. Said we taking over. Said we taking over.
And the English took over the Dutch colony, and I hope you take over the APUSH exam by subscribing to my channel. Like it, tell a friend, and have a beautiful day. Peace. You know, Jamestown was established in 1607. The colony of Quebec was established not too long after up in Canada. So we have this competition taking place. Now, what ends up happening is they establish their claim. Hudson River is named after Henry Hudson. And the first permanent Dutch settlement in what will become New Netherlands takes place at a place called Fort Orange.
Oranges are always orange. O-R-A-N-G-E.
And really, in the 1600s, so we're talking 17th century here, Dutch are really a commercial and naval powerhouse. They are at the peak. They're making some big money and doing pretty well for themselves. The Dutch East India Company is expanding all over the world, and they hire a British guy, a English explorer by the name of Henry Hudson, to go explore on behalf of the company. And we have a real-life recreation. Here it is. Take a look at the map. There he is, cruising along. What's up, everyone? Today we're going to take a look at the Dutch colonization. It's called New Netherlands, and in particular, how that colonization by Holland, by the Dutch, eventually will lead to the birth of this famous American city, home to Biggie Smalls.
Home of Biggie Smalls, Rockefeller headquarters, ladies and gentlemen.
And of course, there I am over the years, getting old and even more handsome as time moves on. Now, what you need to know is a couple of things, and just more background more than anything else, not super important, is Spain basically controlled the area of the Netherlands, and in 1579, with a little help from Protestant England, Holland, the Dutch, are free from Spanish control. And really, a big part of Holland or the Netherlands expansion is done by companies such as the Dutch East India Company. And this was a company which was designed to bring profits to its investors. It's a joint stock company along the coast, and he goes into the area of what will be Delaware and New York. It's not called that yet. And this English explorer was intended to find the Northwest Passage for the Dutch East India Company. They're looking for a shortcut to the Indies in 1609. So this is taking place, and this establishes Dutch claims to this region. Now, keep in mind, England and Spain and France are also peeking around these areas, and